Hi everyone, I'm Chris Jennock with Insight Media. Welcome to Samsung's meeting room here at IFA 2023. I'm here to talk about some big screen technology. I'm going to reference market data from three reputable market research firms. So let's begin. The first thing I want to talk about is the big screen average screen size trend. Screen sizes have been increasing actually for about 2 decades now, and Omdia, who's the focus of this data here, is forecasting the average screen size will continue to expand up to their forecast period, which is 2027. Now, 45 inches may sound low for an average screen size, but remember this covers all LCD sizes. So the interesting graphic, our takeaway, I think, from this slide is this bullet down here. Replacement cycles for TVs has traditionally been 6 to 7 years, but according to Omdia, that was going to shrink now to about 4 to 5 years. I'm not sure exactly what is driving that trend. However, that's good news for panel makers and TV makers and potentially for consumers as well. So big screen sizes, what's the difference between the sizes in terms of trend here? So I've got two charts based on some Omdia data, units that are 65 inches or bigger and units that are less than 65 inches. And what this data shows is that smaller screen sizes going into the future will be selling less volume compared to larger screen sizes. So that makes sense when you consider the previous trend of increasing average screen size as well. How about prices? Well, prices are obviously very important, and the larger screen sizes are expensive. So will those prices come down? Again, according to Omdia, they're going to come down rapidly for the very large screen sizes, particularly the 75-inch size and larger. So that's partly driven by the economics of the market, but it's also driven by the capacity of the industry. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. And here's that minute. So this chart, very busy chart, really talks about the trends in the TV industry over the last few years. So when the pandemic arrived, many consumers had extra cash in their pockets due to government subsidies. They were home, they went out, they spent their money on TVs. That created a boom in the TV market. TV makers profited, panel makers profited, and in fact, prices actually went up. This is the first time in, I think, at least the last 2 decades that prices for TVs actually rose. So this was a very unusual event in the display industry. But once the pandemic was over, the party was over, and the hangover occurred. So we are now in the hangover period since 2022, where sales kind of plummeted for TVs. And as a result, we saw the price of panels, this is panel data, the price of those panels fell and fell and fell to try and stimulate demand. And finally, about the beginning of 2023, the supply and demand stabilized. We now saw an early rise in the panel prices, but it's not really driving a lot of volume right now for the TV market. And so TV makers are still challenged to sell product this year, which means they're going to be having to reduce some prices. And we're actually kind of seeing that now in the trend for the panel pricing here. We're starting to come down in prices again as expected. So this trend is likely to continue into the future, and we'll get back on our typical, they call it a crystal cycle, where there's investment and prices go up, prices go down, but we're now back in the price decline phase of the crystal cycle. So DSCC, Display Supply Chain Consultants, also has a market tracker they call Advanced TVs, which focuses specifically on white OLEDs, QD OLEDs, quantum dot displays, micro and mini LEDs, 4K and 8K products, basically the premium part of the market. And this is their forecast, and you can see there's a bit of a dip here in 2023. So even the premium part of the market is suffering a little bit this year. But according to them, this market will be back on track next year. And you can see from the breakdown of their data here that the many screen sizes are going to benefit from this part of the market. This is the only part of the market that is really growing at this point and looks interesting to most TV makers and panel makers for that matter. And why is that? Well, if you look at this data, this blue line here shows the percent of revenue that comes from TVs that are sold at more than $2,000 a retail price. And they get 10, whatever that is, 10, 12% of their revenue from 2% or less of unit sales. So while this is revenue, it's also the most profitable segment of their line right now. So it really comes down to money, of course. Panel makers like this, TV makers like this, and even consumers like this because they're getting the features that they want and the screen sizes that they want. Here's some additional market data from Futuresource Consulting, who tracks both the consumer and the professional market. They are seeing similar trends. According to their data, 60-inch and above is basically 50% of unit shipments almost across the board for the last 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. In the commercial market, we are seeing a similar trend here. So commercial market for LCDs is now things like kiosk, digital signage, education displays, conference room displays, things like that. Look at the large percentage of 70-inch and above. It's almost 50% of sales. Now, this is a much smaller market, 17 billion in 2008 versus 125 billion for consumer TVs. But nonetheless, the economics are similar here. Very profitable segment, so which is why TV brands and panel makers are very much interested in this market. And this is where Samsung plays as well. If you're going to sell anything big, it has to be smart. According to Omdia, if it's not smart, it's not going to sell at all. And size matters. So we know in entertainment, a big screen gives that more immersive feel, but it also has value in some of the professional markets. In education, in sports bars, in museums, they can be more visible, be more engaging, it can be more captivating. These are all reasons that consumers like it, whether they're outside of the home or in the home. Again, makes sense. As far as Samsung goes, Samsung has been a leading TV brand for, I believe it's at least 15 years now, and on a global scale, the #1 brand. This chart just summarizes some of the key metrics of some recent statistics. For example, in this premium segment of $2,500 or more, Samsung achieved about a 61% market share in the first half of 23. That's a global number, I believe. They have a large market share in this super large, which is greater than 80-inch TV segment. They've just introduced this 98-inch 4K display to join their 8K version. And they have very strong market share in North America and European market. And I believe these figures do represent the large TV segment. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Maybe the super large segment as well. So that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for your attention.